Hello, this is the lecture that I was supposed to have given in class on December 4th. The title, Preparing for Exam 4. And again, my apologies for all of this, and my apologies too for the, let's say, informal nature of this video. But I've already explained the situation. Anyway, so trying to focus on what I feel you need to know will be a help to you for exam 4. I just want to read through the question as I would do in class to begin. And I hope I won't screw this up, which sometimes I do when I'm doing these things. But here we have it. Okay, this is the question that you'll be needing to answer for exam 4. The emergence of early modernity consisted of a variety of developments: political developments, intellectual developments, technological and scientific developments, economic developments, and social developments. These developments led J.M. Roberts to claim the period as the European Age. If this description is valid, it was led by colonialization, science, and enlightenment, particularly the development of human rights. In many ways, modernity can be seen as an age of revolution, when revolutionary change affected not only Europe, but consequently the entire world. Is such a label, together with Roberts's, valid for describing world history during the period circa 1500 to circa 1800? If so, how so? If not, why not? In answering these questions, address as well the questions of 1, what the primary agent of revolutionary change was that served as the primary catalyst, and 2, the extent to which revolution is not a thing itself, but a concept that affects, if not determines, how we understand the developments themselves, or in other words, what constitutes revolutionary change. So that is, again, a complex question. The major part of it is whether or not this period, chronologically, from approximately 1500 to approximately 1800, can be labeled descriptively as an age of revolution and or the European age. And then if so, why is that are those valid labels to describe what we see in the sources as having been developed, as the developments during that period? So that is the major question that you're being asked to deal with. And in doing so, then you need to address questions such as what was the primary agent of change and what was then revolutionary change. Because this is the period that we have the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then it goes on into the chronological period that would be covered in H109 with the Industrial Revolution. We see just the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution in the later 18th century in this course, and then into the 19th century, which also is, in some ways is an age of revolution. But it starts with the Scientific Revolution, what scholars have referred to as a scientific revolution. So the whole question is, what is revolutionary change as distinct from, let's say, non-revolutionary historical change? Because that is what it's really getting at. And so the issue of the revolution is not a thing itself, meaning it is an interpretation. The term revolution is an interpretation of historical developments. The question is that a valid description? And if so, what constitutes revolutionary change as a particular form of historical change? And I hope that makes sense, but that's what it's getting at. So that is kind of what the question is asking. Now, the issue here for you is, how do you go about this? If you look at the list of terms to know for exam 4, you will notice, I hope, a number of terms that were also on the list of terms to know for exam 3. Now, when I talked about preparing for exam 3, I talked about, in some ways, the disjunction between the lectures and the textbook covering early modernity, from the Reformation on into the early modern period. That for exam 3, the lectures had gone into that period, but the textbook was not quite there yet. But then for exam 4, the textbook covers that period. And so the issue is a lot of the material from the lectures from part 3 can also be applied to the exam on part 4. I mean, Luther, I've already talked about. Calvin and Calvinism, I've already talked about. The world system, Immanuel Wallerstein, I talked about last time for exam 3. But here we see the issue of going on into the 17th and then 18th century, excuse me. Kind of adding on to that, because there's no question that once we get into the later 16th century, into the 17th century, Europe anyway is completely changed. Now, the perspective of the European age, as Roberts refers to it, is definitely Eurocentric, but yet it ties in with the concept of world history as the connectivity with the emergence of the world system. Now, you do not have to agree with that position. And it would be very interesting, I think, to say, okay, from the perspective of China, would people in China or Chinese historians focusing on China refer to this chronological period as the Age of Europe? Well, it certainly was the age when European influence and connectivity with China or India was growing and increasing. Now, the Chinese would not consider it to be the European age, nor would the Indians, meaning in India, the European age, or other Asian countries, the East, because from their perspective, it's their own age that they're dealing with. But is it valid to refer to all of this as the European age? And if not, then is there a better alternative? And if so, what might that be to describe the world system? And you could just say, well, the world system, the emergence of the world system that emerges in the course of early modernity, early modern Europe, is sufficient as a label to describe what was going on, part of which was revolution. Or is revolution different from the world system? Could the world system have emerged, basically as it did, without revolution, i.e. the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, the American Revolution, the French Revolution? What constitutes revolutionary change? Was the scientific revolution really revolutionary? In some ways, yes. Was the Reformation and the developments during the 16th century revolutionary? In some ways, yes. And in my Reformation course, History B354, that's one of the major questions I think I asked on the final exam. Was the Reformation a revolution? And if so, why? And how so? And if not, how not? And so it's the labels historians use, and this goes all the way back to the beginning of the course in discussing how we approach a course such as this. What does it mean? What does these terms of perspectives on world history to approximately 1800, what does that really mean? And perspectives, what type of perspectives? Perspectives of from whom? From what point of observation? How we describe the past, conditions and effects, how we understand the past. And that's what this is getting at too. How do we come to an understanding of the verifiable developments and changes that we see during this chronological period of approximately 1500 to 1800? How do we describe that? How do we label it? Because those terms that we use condition how we understand it. That is the issue. To call it the scientific revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution. What did the French Revolution end in? It ended in empire. It ended with Napoleon. Now that is an issue that kind of is the end part of this course, beginning part of H109, because the French Revolution, as a revolution against the medieval feudal orders system of voting within Parliament, overturned that entire system. They got rid of the monarch, executed Louis XVI, and that ended up in a relatively short period of time to the emergence of Napoleon and the French Empire. So, what's the outcome? The American Revolution, declaring independence from Britain. What does it lead to? We could say American imperialism, a different form of imperialism, but still a sense of imperialism. So these bourgeois revolutions, and what again in H109 will be covered in terms of Marx and his call for the revolution of the proletariat, are they really revolutionary, or are they simply revolts and changes? Is revolution even if it fails? What's the difference between rebels and revolutionaries? And are revolutionaries positive or negative? Well, our country was founded based on revolutionaries. But if we talked about a revolutionary group in somewhere in the United States today, that would be seen as a threat, because it's a threat to the established order. Revolution is overturning the established order. What causes that? What leads to that? Is it economic issues? Let's say, of course. Is it social issues? Of course. Is it intellectual issues and political issues? Of course. But is there, or was there, in these various revolutions, an underlying factor? And what is the role of human rights? In the lecture for December 2nd that I stressed, I hope you would read the written lecture, because I wasn't able to make it to class to talk about it. I argue that human rights are revolutionary, a revolutionary force. Doesn't mean they are always bring about revolution, but appealing to human rights is problematic. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as I talked about in that lecture, was formulated in the aftermath of World War II, 1948, as a means of preventing World War ever from happening again. And here we are on the brink of perhaps World War III, at least in the talk out there. And that might not come about. We'll have to wait and see. Human rights. We can't say that the United States necessarily is the epigon of human rights, also to discuss in that lecture. And why haven't we passed the Equal Rights Amendment? Equal Rights Amendment. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, just to read it. It's very short. It should be completely non-controversial, in my mind. It's just saying that women have equal rights. But that has been, no, we can't allow that. We're not going to amend the Constitution to affirm the equal rights of women. Why is that? Is it fear of human rights? Is it fear of the quote-unquote establishment, the male establishment, that the assertion of human rights, equal human rights for women, could be revolutionary, which means the male structures might lose some of their power and dominance? Is that what's going on? What is it? Why are human rights, which are a relatively recent development coming out of the Enlightenment, as I mentioned with John Locke, is really the first one who talks about inherent human rights for individual human beings. Of course, he's meaning property males. That was to have revolutionary effects, as it was all along, even though it was originally or earlier on, rights were associated with orders of society or classes of society or groups of society, which we can see in this English Civil War, which we can see in the Glorious Revolution, which in context Locke was writing. And then a century later, almost, the American Declaration of Independence and the American Revolutionary War, and then the French Revolutionary War, and yet again, Olympe de Gouges was beheaded for asserting her Declaration of the Rights of Woman and Citizen. That's treasonous. Are human rights really human rights? Today we have the UN. The UN also was established in the aftermath of World War II to ensure human rights across the globe, so that human rights are globally recognized as an international order, at least as a goal. It doesn't mean that they're respected or upheld, but at least in principle, there's a lot of countries that have signed on to far more of the conventions, the international human rights conventions, than have the United States. We say, yeah, but human rights are realized far greater in the United States than some of those countries that have signed. That could be very well true. But what really does it mean to be human, and how do we govern ourselves? And that's what this is all about. What does it mean to be a human being in the world in which we find ourselves? What's the issue of identity and who we are? How do we understand? How do we label ourselves? What are the terms that we use to describe who we are, and how does that affect our understanding of who we are? It's different. So often we can say we are, as Americans, we are the bastions of peace and democracy and liberty in the world. And that's our divine mission, almost. Or we can say we're the great oppressors who abuse their power and impose it on less powerful people militarily by force, and we're the greatest threat in the world. Now, the developments are the same. Let's say that the facts are the same. How we describe them. If we bomb a target somewhere and civilians are killed, we refer to it as collateral damage, and we apologize for it. We say how we're never intend that. But that makes it really a euphemism instead of a brutal attack killing innocent civilians. Collateral damage. The facts, the events, what happens is the same. How we describe it is so different. That is what this, in some ways, entire class has been trying to get at. How do we describe what we observe in the past, or actually in the present, but that signifies the past? How do we put it all together? And that is looking forward then to your final. And there's only two substantive lectures for this exam. But you can draw on all of part 3. You can draw on the entire course, because everything is intended to build towards the final. And the same will be the case for part 4. If you look at the syllabus, we just have 2 weeks and then part 4 and then the final. This is where it's all leading, the culmination. I hope that conceptually helps you approach exam 4. This is the negative side of doing this by video. I can't sit and ask you, does that make sense? Which I probably ask too often. But if you have questions, please email me with a question. We can have Zoom sessions and talk about it over Zoom if you want, or just over email, because it's, I think technically exam 4 is due on Friday. I think, as I mentioned, still not, I don't think the majority of you have turned in exam 3 yet. So I encourage you to do so as soon as possible so you can get to exam 4, so you can get to the final, which we'll be talking about next week. As always, basically, detail and specifics. Relating the details and specifics to the generalities is the key. the terms and what they describe. If we just focus on the details, we're not getting the understanding. If we just get the understanding of the terms that we use to describe things, it lacks any kind of substance to talk about. Yes, early modern Europe was revolutionary. We see the scientific revolution. We see, therefore, it can be but what does that mean? What's behind those terms? That's what it's getting at. So the more of the terms on the list of terms to know that you can include, the better. And if you can't include material from Asia, India, also, South America, during this period, Native American perspective. I think in the written lecture that I hope you all read, Kondiaronk, whatever it is, the Wendat perspective and his critique of the French in terms of property, mine and thine. That is very important and an important perspective. And that is an American perspective, just not an American-European perspective based on the invasion of the Europeans to this continent. How do we understand it all? Was the age of Europe because we have the military might and the guns and the power and the money to exert ourselves on the world? Is that why it's called the European age? Is there a qualitative aspect of that, or is it simply descriptive quantitatively? Now, in my view, it's definitely that term. It reveals Robert's bias, understandably, his point of observation, as is mine. My point of observation is Europe. That's what I study, that's what I know. But we have to try to see that within the broader perspective, to question our own assumptions, to question our understandings based on our own points of observation, which is not to say we undermine them or get rid of them, or that they're wrong because they're not a different understanding or because they're biased. As I said, biased. Everyone is biased because bias is just the point of observation, the influence of the point of observation. Doesn't mean we can ever get to a neutral, quote unquote, objective point of observation. It's impossible. But we should strive to place our own biases, our own recognition of our own points of places of observation, points of observation within the broader perspective, to realize that we are observing the evidence from a particular perspective, a particular point of view, a particular place of observation. And what effect does that point of observation have on our understanding of what we observe? That's what this is all getting at. You're thinking, oh my God, yeah, but that's what history is all about. That's what doing history is all about. That's why I asked the question about the distinction between world history and the history of the world. Because it's all about how we describe things and then how those labels and terms affect our understanding. Because that is what is really important, how we understand ourselves and the world in which we find ourselves. And that's why I think history is so important. And that's why I think this course is so important. And that is why I ask you in your final essay to put it all together for yourself, in your own grand narrative. But I'll be addressing that again next week, I hope. So I think that's about it for now. Good luck with this. I hope you have fun with it. I know this is the end of the semester, and this is not the only course you're taking. So me saying have fun with an exam and the final exam may be kind of a bit perverse. But if you can take some time to say, okay, this is not just a task that I have to complete, but this is something I need to think about. And how do I understand it? You'll do better on the exam. Anyway, again, if you have any questions, please send me an email, and we can talk about it. ask for a Zoom meeting. We can talk about it. I am available for both. And again, I hope to be in class next week. I'm pretty sure I will be. Pain medication is beginning to help a bit, so I can focus a bit more. So anyway, that is where we are with all of this. So again, my apologies that I have to do this virtually, but I hope this has helped somewhat in terms of helping you approach exam 4. In terms of what I'm expecting and thinking, I could say, okay, I would expect something about the Reformation, something about the scientific revolution, the Enlightenment, human rights, as you're asking these questions, the world system. Those are the kind of some of the major terms I would expect would be treated in dealing with this question, in terms of the validity of referring to the developments between 1500 and 1800 as the Age of Revolution and or as the European Age, and why not. Again, there are no right or wrong answers. There are good answers and bad answers, and the more of the course material you can bring in as evidence on which to base your argument, the better your exam will be. So, okay, I'm going to shut up for now. Again, questions, just let me know. Again, my apologies. And thank you for your patience and understanding. And I will see you all next week. Okay, bye-bye.